What's up, everybody? Welcome to my art channel. This is Randy. A question I get from time to time, quite often actually, is how can I progress as an artist? How can I improve? How can I get better at art? And first off, I'm really flattered that anyone would ask me that because I'm personally always trying to improve myself. I'm always working to get better. And so that's an indication that maybe someone sees some improvement or something good in what I'm doing. And I really appreciate the question. In this video, I'm going to be working on some abstract flowers. I thought it was a good opportunity to try to answer this question because this is practice for me. This is me trying to improve, trying to get better, focusing on a few specific things. I'm going to talk about my general approach, how I've tried to improve as an artist over the years, and some of the topics that I'll cover are subject matter, perfectionism, asking good questions, and that's kind of related to exploring and not focusing on results. Yeah, like I said, I'm going to be talking generally high level on a few things, but I'm also going to slow this video down and speak specifically to some techniques and to my approach with this specific painting because it is practice, and I think that'll be hopefully very helpful for you all. So this is a pretty big question, and there's so many different ways to answer it. The simple answer is practice. The end. All right, thanks for joining me. I'm just kidding. No, it is practice. Practice is important. Practice is important for all of us, but I would say a better answer is probably intentional practice, and I'll get into that a little bit. If you are an absolute beginner and you're just starting out and you're one of those people that are struggling with drawing, or maybe you think you can't draw, I would recommend getting the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. That book actually, changed my life. It changed my approach to art. I'm not going to break down that book here because that's a whole video on itself. The biggest thing from that book that it taught me was how to see things. So this idea that you draw what you see, not what you think you see. And there's, again, I can't get into the details on that here. If you have questions about that specific statement, hit me up in the comments and I'll be happy to talk about it with you. Maybe I'll make a video on that in the future. I'll put a link in the description to the book. It's a great book for anyone, but definitely for someone who's just learning how to draw. For me, practice. It's important, but it's also hard to do sometimes. And so I think for me, it's important to pick something that is either very specific that I'm trying to improve on so that I know why I'm doing this practice and why it's important to do it, and I can just focus on that, and to pick something that will hold my interest, right? Something that is subject matter that has meaning to me, or that I've never painted before, so it has novelty, or that it inspires me in some way. So I think a combination of what am I trying to improve as well as what is the subject matter or the style that I'm working on is really important to maintain focus while practicing. So I guess for me, around subject matter, I'm always looking for subjects, like things that I have personal interest in, whether it's figures or nature, landscapes, whatever, things more personal. I'm looking for those things that will hold my interest visually and potentially let me combine abstract styles and realistic styles and really explore. So I love this idea of exploration. It has to be something that gets me excited and something that I'll enjoy, but also maybe is a little bit of a challenge for me, maybe something I've never done before or haven't done it in a very specific way. So in this specific case, I hadn't painted many flowers before. It was something I was kind of interested in. I saw some paintings by Bob Burridge in this very abstract style, at least in the way he painted the backgrounds to start the flower paintings. And it looked like it was something that I could do. It looked like it was a fun exercise. And I specifically wanted to focus on the negative shape painting aspect of this project. I saw some things in his process that I felt like I already knew how to do, but I also have some techniques in my repertoire, if you will, that I felt like I could add to this process and make it interesting. So that again piqued my interest. I did one of these paintings earlier. You might have seen that video, and I was pretty happy with it. It was just again another practice piece, something to get started. But once I made the piece, I immediately saw some things that I felt like I could improve on. The main focus of this technique is the negative shape painting piece, where you're removing elements by painting the background last. So you paint this really abstract, thick, crazy mix of colors, and then you go in with the background color and try to remove things that don't look like flowers, and so you end up leaving this silhouette of flowers. First time I did that, I ended up painting what looked like a rectangle. It was just like, it felt like it was just this almost rectangular cloud of color, and it was, it's interesting, it was fine, but that wasn't my intentions. Again, with this practice, I was very intentional. I wanted to create a more pleasing organic shape. And I think that the first time I was, again, I was trying to be precious. I was trying to not cover up individual color patches that I put down because I thought they looked nice. And that got me off track with what I was actually trying to achieve with the piece and what I was trying to learn from the process. And so the second time around, I just went crazy with the background, and I got to this place in my mind where I just focused on, I'm going to force myself to make a more pleasing, interesting silhouette. I'm not going to protect any of these parts, if that makes any sense. I'm not going to protect any of these little blobs of paint that I've put down. I'm going to cover them wherever I feel like it will make the overall image better, more in line with what I was trying to achieve in the first place. Now, this is probably one of the most important parts to me, and that is mindset. To me, mindset is super important, and it's kind of interesting and difficult to talk about sometimes. But I used to think of each painting as these precious, precarious things that I had to be super careful with, and I had this constant fear of messing up or making mistakes, and it became a very stressful process. I mean, it's not something that was enjoyable, frankly. Somewhere along the line, that changed for me, and I started to see things in a completely different way, and I started to also see sudden improvement, like a lot of improvement, and that has kind of carried on through from that point on. I don't know where I got the idea that these things were important and precious, that art was like this special thing that, this relates to perfectionism for sure. But it's this idea that, it's something to be messed up. And it feels silly to me to even say that I felt that way, but it's absolutely part of how I felt. And I think that in college, there was this story that I heard from the artist Marcel Duchamp. He had this piece of work, this piece that was made of glass, and it had been cracked during shipping, so it had gotten damaged. And I think when he found out that the piece was broken, everyone expected his reaction to be, just like horror and shock and furious and all this stuff. But he said something like, "Well, now it's finished," and I think that's brilliant. He fixed a lot of the bigger cracks in the piece, but he left some of the smaller pieces in the final work. And he had this idea that he was going to accept this chance element as part of the piece, and I think that's just great. And I think that moment, that one quote, I think had something to do with me sort of changing my attitude towards getting over this idea that things are good or bad, or that they're gonna they need to be a certain way. It just is what it is. And people in the end may hate it or love it. Most people probably find it they're just indifferent. But I shifted how I approached making things, because I became more connected with the act of creating and making something, taking the act of making something seriously, but not taking the results too seriously. Especially not trying to judge too harshly, what the end result was going to be. Just look at what is working, what is not working, trying to get better each time. I try to keep in mind that these things don't define me. They're a part of me. I can't worry too much about what people think about this stuff, if that makes any sense, including myself. In some ways, even if they're deemed good, that's great. But in some cases, that's even worse, because you can fall into this idea of being complacent and getting stuck and settling on what's working. And I want to be able to repeat these processes and get better every time, but I don't want to duplicate the results over and over, if that makes any sense. I always want to be looking for something new. I want to talk about identity a little bit, just to wrap that up. The idea that artists have, that this work defines them, the things that they make are part of them. And that is true. This is absolutely coming from your soul, right? These are your expressions. But you can't get hung up on what others think about it, because it's all subjective anyway. It's really personal preference, what people are interested in, what they see. You really, I think I need to make this stuff for myself, and again, not really worry too much about the end result, but more about what am I doing, how am I making things, trying to focus on the process as much as I can, and not worry too much about the results. I will improve over time. Things get better over time. And even looking back at stuff that I did back in the day that I thought was horrible and I judged pretty harshly, looking back on it years later, it actually wasn't bad. In fact, it's pretty good. So you got to not take the end results too seriously. So to wrap this up, I think I want to talk a little bit about asking questions and observation. And so I think that it's obvious that most artists, one of the keys to being an artist is observing, obviously looking at what you're painting or drawing, but it's deeper than that, right? It's observing the world around us and interpreting the way we see the world and expressing the way we see the world in these things. I think that that also applies to the work we make ourselves, right? So for me, one of the keys to improving is observing what I've made, just looking at it and asking some simple questions, right? Like, what would have happened if I chose to make different decisions with the colors or the layout or the subject matter, or a simple thing like the direction of the light? Or what if I combined this with a different subject or object? And also, just how could I use this technique in different ways? Like, so these flowers that are, made from these random, accidentally placed, honestly, from the beginning, how could I use that in the future? Could I do that? Could I do something interesting with backgrounds, maybe in landscape painting? Or could I use it as a fully abstract expression and maybe combine this technique with other things that I've done? I'm always thinking about stuff like that, and as I reflect on the things that I'm making, I'm sort of storing in the back of my mind these things that I've learned, and I rely on them next time around. There's going to be a time where I don't know. I just see things that I've learned in the past in a similar way by taking this approach creep back into my process and resurface, if you will. I think that I think I do this subconsciously, but I think that over the years I've made it much more of an intentional, conscious effort. Where I really do look at the work and start to ask questions. What if I made this bigger? What if I made it smaller? What if I changed this color, etc. And so I don't know if this is helpful to you all. I'm doing my best here. I think that this video could be 4 hours long, and I don't want to bore people, but I think that if folks are interested, it helps me to reflect on it, to think through it myself, and to kind of figure out, what am I actually doing here, and am I doing what I think I should be doing? And let me know. I really appreciate the questions. If there's any specific thing that we talked about, sort of brushed over, and pun intended, that you'd like to go deeper on, yeah, hit me up in the comments. I'll be happy to dig into that and hopefully continue the conversation. Thank you all. See you next time.